spotted had detected some nasty interior beast and had locked it in a cell with a steel door. You could hear it thumping and jumping in there like a rabid raccoon that would bite at approach, but you couldn't see it. The Henderson kid was on the football team, a noseback or a point guard or some such thing, and while he was as horrible on the gridiron as any of the more meerkats, he was a nice kid and a fairly good student. Wesley liked him, but still, he had been ready to rip the boy's head off when he spotted him in class with what Wesley assumed was a PDA or a newfangled cell phone. This was shortly after Ellen had walked out. In those early days of the breakup, Wesley often found himself at 3 in the morning pulling some literary comfort food down from the shelf, usually his old friends Jack Aubrey and Stephen Matchery, their adventures recounted by Patrick O'Brien. And not even that had kept him from remembering the ringing slam of the door as Ellen had left his life, probably for good. So he was in a foul mood and more than ready for back talk as he approached Henderson and said, "Put it away. This is a literature class, not an internet chat room." The Henderson kid had looked up and given him a sweet smile. It hadn't lifted Wesley's foul mood in the slightest, but it did dissolve his anger on contact, mostly because he wasn't an angry man by nature. He supposed he was depressive by nature, maybe even dysthymic. Hadn't he always suspected that Ellen Silverman was too good for him? Hadn't he known in his heart of hearts that the door slam had been waiting for him from the very beginning? When he'd spent the evening talking to her at a boring faculty party, Ellen played like a girl. He played like a loser. He couldn't even stay mad at a student who was goofing with his pocket computer or Nintendo or whatever it was in class. "It's the assignment, Mr. Smith," the Henderson kid had said. On his forehead was a large purple bruise from his last outing in Meerkat Blue. "It's Paul's case. Look." The kid turned the gadget so Wesley could see it. It was a flat white panel, rectangular, less than half an inch thick. At the top was Amazon Kindle and the Smile logo Wesley knew well. He was not entirely a computer illiterate himself and had ordered books from Amazon plenty of times, although he usually tried the bookstore in town first, partly out of pity. Even the cat, who spent most of its life dozing in the window, showed how it worked. The interesting thing on the kid's gadget wasn't the logo on top or the teeny tiny keyboard, computer keyboard, surely, on the bottom. In the middle of the gadget was a screen, and on the screen was not a screensaver or a video game where young men and women with buffed out bodies were killing zombies in the ruins of New York, but a page of Willa Cather's story about the poor boy with the destructive illusions. Wesley had reached for it, then drew back his hand. "May I?" "Go ahead," the Henderson kid, Richard or Robert, told him. "It's pretty neat. You can download books from thin air, and you can make the type as big as you want. Also, the books are cheaper because there's no paper or binder." That sent a minor chill through Wesley. He became aware that most of his Intro to American Lit class was watching him. As a 35-year-old, Wesley supposed it was hard for him to decide if he was old school, like the ancient Dr. Wentz, who looked remarkably like a crocodile in a three-piece suit, or new school, like Suzanne Montanari, who liked to play Avril Lavigne's girlfriend in her introduction to modern drama class. Wesley supposed his reaction to Henderson's Kindle would help him with that. "Mr. Henderson," he said, "there will always be books, which means there will always be paper and binder. Books are real objects. Books are friends." "Yeah, but," Henderson said with his sweet smile. It had now become slightly sly. "But there are also ideas and emotions. You said so in our first class." "Well," Wesley had said, "you've got me there, but books aren't solely ideas. Books have a smell, for instance, one that gets better, more nostalgic as the years go by. Does this gadget of yours have a smell?" "Nope," Henderson replied, "not really, but when you turn the pages, here, with this button, they kind of flutter like the real book, and I can go to any page that I want, and when it sleeps, it shows pictures of famous writers, and it holds a charge, and it's a computer," Wesley had said. You're reading off the computer. The Henderson kid had taken his Kindle back. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's still Paul's case. You've never heard of a Kindle, Mr. Smith? Josie pointed out. Her tone was that of a kindly anthropologist asking a member of New Guinea's Kombai tribe if he had ever heard of elevator shoes or electric stoves. No, he said, not because it was true. He had seen something called Shop the Kindle Store when he bought books from Amazon online, but because on the whole, he thought he would prefer being perceived by them as old school. New school was somehow mediocre. You ought to get one, the Henderson kid said, and when Wesley replied without even thinking, perhaps I will, the class had broken into spontaneous applause. For the first time since Ellen's departure, Wesley felt faintly cheered, because they wanted him to get a book reading edge, and also because the applause suggested they saw him as old school after all. But teaching old school. Okay, that part